Hi, I'm Beth from So Country, and today's tutorial is for the Munch Tote lunch bag from Backstitch and Baste. This is their latest pattern, and as soon as I saw it, I knew I was going to love it. I love the shape. I love what the purpose is, that it's very functional, can be used for many things. And when I sewed my first one, it was such a fun sew. I think this will be great for gifts. I think this will be great for craft shows, and just even in my own home, I can use it for so many things besides just lunches. So let's just talk about it a little bit before we get started. We have the handles at top. We have the little grab tabs here, pull tabs, I think they're referred to in the pattern. The back is the same as the front. The zipper goes all the way down, so you can have a really good opening. You could easily, you could easily pack a lunch for everybody in there. This is not just going to be like, oh, a single lunch bag. It has enough room and depth that you can get a full lunch for everybody. And I just think about traveling and going on trips and things, putting all your cosmetics in here. I can think of so many uses for this pattern for sure. I know kids are going to love it because kids love having their own little bags to carry around. This version was made with fabric and webbing from the Empurrium, that is from Brittany Nicole. The one I'm going to be sewing up in the video today is also going to have materials all from the Empurrium. I'll have that link as well as the link for the pattern in my description. So let's go ahead and talk about all the materials we're going to be using today to create our Munch Tote lunch bag. All of my materials will be a cotton woven. I recommend that you interface every piece of your material with a medium weight interfacing like a Royal Pixie Light or the equivalent of an SF101. So go ahead and interface everything first. I think that's your best step, honestly. If you're using materials like a water resistant canvas inside or a water resistant canvas outside, anything like that, yeah, you wouldn't need to interface all those pieces. But if you're using a cotton woven, interface everything. For me, in both of mine, I am using a fleece to give a little bit more structure and sturdy feel to the bag. When I do my next ones, I'm probably going to go ahead and substitute that for foam. The structure of my bag is not bad at all. You can see it's a great shape, holds itself really well. But I just think after a couple of times of using it, it may have the tendency to get a little slouchy. Especially if the kid kind of smashes it somewhere, it may not bounce back as good as foam would. For an adult, I think the fleece would be fine, but if you're going to be making these for kids, use something a little bit better so it has a little bit better ability to bounce back. The fleece or the foam will be kept out of the seam allowance, which lends just to really great smooth seams all around the bag. So we will need our zipper tape. Number 5 is what I'm using, and I just cut mine longer than the zipper panel pieces. I don't even measure that one. I am going to be using 2 zipper pulls, just like I did 2 on this one. I am going to have 4 side pieces, 2 exterior and 2 lining. The side pieces are going to go right here. And so you can also use this as a contrast if you wanted to and have this whole gusset be a contrast or just your bottom and side panels be a contrast. But I'm going to have 4 of those. I'm going to have 2 bottom pieces, again, exterior and interior. On the bottom, I did put a layer of fleece on both of those, both the lining and the exterior, just to give it a little bit more kind of structure stability. If I was using foam, I wouldn't put 2. I would just put 1 layer of foam. We have 4 zipper panels. This is what we will attach that zipper to make the gusset for the bag. On the 4, I have 2 exterior, 2 interior. On the exterior ones, I do have that layer of fleece. And then we have the main panels. We have 2 of those, 2 exteriors, 2 linings. Again, on the exteriors, I have the fleece interfaced already on them. That's all you need. Now, could this pattern be adapted to do different things? Definitely. You could add mesh pockets inside and out. You could add slip pockets. You could add a zipper pocket. You could do whatever you want. The pattern gives you just this great frame for you to create all the different things you want with it. So definitely add what would work best for you. The other thing we're going to need is the webbing. I'm going to have, I think she calls this the strap bar. So that is going to be the piece that goes across here. Then we're also going to have 2 handled pieces for the handles of the top. She does tell you in the pattern that you could use webbing for this, or you could use your cotton woven if you didn't want to use webbing. So you do have options if you're someone who doesn't like to use webbing. The pull tabs, again, you can use the fabric or you can use webbing. I'm just using webbing. The pull tabs are not a necessity, but I really feel like they help with the bag. I would not make these without these pull tabs just because it is hard to open and close it without. And then the last thing we need is binding. I do love to bind the bag. What I did was I just cut strips off of a mini roll of water resistant canvas. It doesn't fray, so I'm okay there, and I can just leave it raw. So you can see how just maybe a little bit of wrinkling, but it's not bad at all for sure. In the pattern, there are instructions on how to cut your binding on the bias, because where we're working on a curve, having that would help with the stretch and the fit. She also gives you a different technique to bind than I do. Her technique is great. I love it. Definitely check out the pattern for those techniques. Those are all the pieces that are going to be used in this bag. So let's go ahead and get started with everything. The first things I'm going to do is I think I'm going to see if I have any tags that will look good on the bag. And if I do, I will go ahead and put them on off camera. I probably would put a tag here if I can find one I like. You possibly could put one right here. I've done that before, but I don't think I will with this one. I think I'll put it more in the center. So I'm going to look for that, and then we'll come back. I'm also going to make some measurements while I'm off camera for where you're going to place the handle and the strap. I'll show you where I'll make the measurements, but I won't be measuring them and giving the measurements on camera. They are included, of course, in the pattern. I have my 2 exterior pieces out. These are the main panels. I did go ahead and add a tag to both of those. I just centered the tags on the bag and then sewed them down a little bit further down from where I know the handle will be. So I did go ahead and make center marks at the top and the bottom. I used the pattern measurements to draw a horizontal line across the bag, and you measure up from the bottom. Then I'm measuring from the sides and I draw 2 vertical lines. You probably can't see them very clearly where I did use mine with chalk, but that is how you do it. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take the strap handle. So this is not that tab that goes across, this is the handle. And you are going to line up the ends. It's going to be directly on that line, and it's going to be on the inside of the line you drew, the vertical line. Once you have this in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of glue, this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. You do not have to use the glue. You could use a piece of double-sided tape. You could use pins and place a clips and have it secured that way. It's whatever your preference is. Just a little bit at the bottom, so whenever I'm sewing, it won't shift as easily as it could possibly do. It will be a little bit more secure on that. The glue dries really quickly, and so I'll just add, just like I said, a little bit to the bottom of that webbing there and push it down. I don't expect it to be kind of a permanent hold. It's just so it doesn't slip while I'm sewing is really all I'm wanting to have happen here. And then I'll even, after I had this one done, I'll come back when I have the webbing placed on this one to make sure they definitely look like they're in line and they're evenly marked and everything like that. Just always like to double check with stuff like this. I'm going to sew across the bottoms here. The pattern tells you could do a small square with an X in it for extra stability. You'll just want to make sure you keep it very small. You don't want it to go too high because then it would show and that wouldn't look nice. I'm just going to do a couple rows of stitching here to make sure that I keep mine secured. Now that I got that in place, I'm going to take out that strap bar. Like I said, yours may be a cotton woven. The pattern gives you another set of measurements for this part. You're going to measure up from the bottom again, and you'll make 2 sets of measurements there. Basically, you want to make for sure that this strap bar here that you're going to place is just a little bit lower than your webbing. You don't want it to sit directly on the webbing. You want it to encase those raw edges of the webbing just a little bit. I'm going to go off camera and get mine measured and put in place, and then I'll come back to show you how I'm going to sew it. Now that I have this strap bar where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and again just add a little bit of glue. Like I said, I'm not doing a lot, just enough basically, so it kind of will not shift so much while I'm sewing it. Just makes it a little bit easier for me. Push that down. I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch all the way around this webbing. If you wanted, you could add rivets right here where those straps are to add a little bit of extra security and for a cute touch. I'm just going to trim up the webbing on both sides of this piece. Can remove all of my clips now. I'm going to pull out one of my lining pieces. If you want to add a pocket or a tag or anything here, go ahead and do that now. If not, what you'll do is you'll simply place these wrong sides together and we're going to baste all the way around. So I'm just going to clip around these pieces and then we're going to sew it all together, just a basting stitch about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to sew from this exterior side so that I can make sure that I keep that handle pushed down while I'm sewing. I don't want it basted up, of course. So let's go ahead and baste all the way around these two pieces. So now I have my exterior and my linings attached, and this is going to be the back side of my bag, and it's finished and completed. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the front, and I'm going to do all those same steps. Before I sew on the straps though, I will make for sure they match this one so they look good on both sides and even, and I'll also add the lining. I'll do all those steps off camera, and when I come back, we will go ahead and start working on the gusset. I have both the main panels completed, the front and the back, the linings attached. The only other thing I'm going to do, and this isn't in the pattern, it's just what I've been doing that helps me when I have a bag with really sharp corners. So when I have a bag with 90-degree angles, I have been doing this step and I find it helps me a little. What I do is I draw a small square in the bottom of where those 90-degree corners are. If I had a bag that had 90-degree corners on all sides, I would cut the square out of each side. Where the tops of this one are rounded, I won't cut anything there. How I determine the size of the square I'm going to cut out is just the seam allowance. So if the seam allowance is 1/2 inch, I'll cut out a 1/2 inch square. If it's 3/8, I'll cut out a 3/8 inch square, 1/4 inch, same thing. And so when I do this, I will show you, I'll go ahead and cut it out now and get it prepped, and I'll cut it out on both the front and the back. And whenever we attach the lining, this will help me to get that best shape I feel like on the bag. Now, like I said, this is not in the pattern, so you do not have to do that, or you can just watch how I do it and then decide later if you would like to try that step to see if it works for you in your sewing room. After I cut out these corners, what I'll do is I'll set the main panels aside and we won't use them until after we complete our gusset. So let's set these aside. Let's pull out all the pieces we're going to use for our gusset. We will start with our zipper panels and the zipper. My print really isn't directional. It goes every way, so I'm not too worried about having it be perfect in the way it matches with the zipper. If yours is directional, make sure you have it going the way you want. These are my lining pieces, so I'll start by getting out one lining piece, and I'll just add it to the zipper. So the way I do it is I'll have my lining right sides up, I will have my zipper right sides up. I am just going to attach it to that long edge, the raw edges matching. I am going to baste all the way down this. This is an extra unnecessary step. If you wanted to add the exterior and make a traditional zipper sandwich, you can. That is fine. Sometimes I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll do it this way. Sometimes I'll do it the other way. For this one, I'm going to do it this way. So what I'll do is I'll take it directly over my sewing machine. I'm not adding any clips or anything. I'm just going to baste along the edge with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to get these two connected. And that way I don't have to worry about them shifting later. Now that I have the lining attached to the zipper, I'm going to pull out one of my exterior pieces. My exterior has the fleece attached to it, and then I will just take it and flip it so that it is right sides together with both the zipper and that lining piece. Make sure I match up those short edges, and then I am just going to sew this one on with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Again, I'm not going to use any clips or anything, and I'll just make sure while I'm sewing that I'm keeping everything matched up. Now that I have these pieces sewn together, all I'll do is I'll fold them wrong sides together, and I'm going to start basting down these two raw edges. That's what I'll do first. After I get that done, then I'll come and top stitch down this side, and I will do both of those stitches 1/8 of an inch away. I just find that if I do this raw edge first, I can get a better top stitch because I can pull them at the same time, and I don't have to worry about that lining kind of creeping up behind the zipper. This is how the first half of the zipper gusset looks. I have it basted on one side and top stitched on the other. I have my lining on the back, and you can see it looks really good there. It's not getting too close to the zipper teeth. I'm going to repeat those same exact steps to attach these other two, both the exterior and the lining, to the other side of the zipper, and I'll do that off camera. When I come back on camera, I will have these other zipper panels attached. I'll also put on my zipper pulls off camera and trim up my zipper tape. I finished my zipper gusset, have the panels attached, have the pulls added on. I'm using 2, and trimmed up the edges. What I'm going to do now is pull out those pull tabs, and all you do is just center it there on your zipper tape and baste it in place. Pretty simple. And this is just going to allow you to open and close your little lunch tote bag easier. Now that you have the pull tabs added onto your bag, let's go ahead and grab out your 4 side panels. You should have 2 exteriors with some kind of stabilizer, fleece, foam, Decaville light, whatever you choose. And then your 2 interiors. I don't have anything on these, just a layer of medium weight interfacing. If you're using vinyl, of course you wouldn't need to stabilize it so much, so just use the stabilizer depending on the materials you're using. What you're going to do is you're going to place the exterior right sides together. You'll want to make sure you place the right side. If you do it this way, of course, you can see there'd be a lot of overhang and it wouldn't work. So one side will fit, one side will not. Match up those raw edges, and on these I am just going to do a traditional kind of like I shouldn't call it a zipper sandwich because it's not really, but the traditional way you would do it with the exterior and the lining pieces right sides together all at once. Where it's a short side, I don't feel the need to do it the other way where I based on the exterior first. I will add a few clips here since I'm going through multiple layers to kind of prevent them from shifting. I'm going to go ahead and attach that same method on the other side. Here's what we have. I'm going to sew down both of these clipped edges. It is very important to use the seam allowance given the pattern on these next few steps. If we don't, we run the risk of the gusset not fitting the main panels. The pattern is tested using that seam allowance with the measurement. So if you play around with this area, you're going to risk not having a proper fitting gusset. So definitely make sure you back stitch when you start and stop here. Now that I have everything sewn together, I will take those side pieces and simply pull them wrong sides together. I'm going to just top stitch, and so what I'll do is I'll kind of pull to make sure everything's nice and tight, and then I'll actually top stitch onto the side pieces, not the zipper panels. I top stitch around here, and the pattern does tell me that I can go ahead and baste this all the way around. I typically don't do it, but you definitely could, and it would make things easier. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my bottom pieces. You should have 2 bottom pieces. Both of mine are stabilized with a layer of fleece, so definitely you'll want to have these kind of sturdy, so either foam, Decaville light, couple layers of your SF101, whatever you feel best with, just to make for sure that it is going to be a nice solid bottom so that the bag doesn't sag and can hold whatever you want to put in there. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm clipping my exterior right sides together with the exterior of my gusset piece. Flip that over and do the same thing with your lining. Fortunately for me, I use everything the same, so mine doesn't matter. If yours does, make sure you don't get confused and have the exterior with the exterior, the lining with the lining. So those are, the bottom pieces are just clipped together with the side. What I'm going to do now, just what I did earlier, I'm going to sew with that seam allowance given the pattern across all those layers, and I'm going to definitely make sure I back stitch when I start and stop. I am going to once again take the bottom pieces, pull them wrong sides together, pull it tight here, and then let's top stitch again. This time we're top stitching on the bottom, about 1/8 of an inch away from that edge we just sewed. So here's what we have, the zipper panels, the side, and the bottom. I'm going to take the free end of the bottom exterior, I'm going to take it all the way over to the other side. So here is the exterior of my side piece. Let me get this kind of in frame so you can see. So this is the side attached to the zipper. I'm going to take that bottom piece and come all the way over and just clip it all in place there. Right sides together, exterior to exterior. So this is what we have right now. Zipper, the sides, here's a side, and the bottom. I need to get this lining bottom all the way over here. So it's a little bit tricky. You can roll it, you can fold it, whatever you want. It doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you get them to match up. So the pattern tells you can roll it tightly. Lots of times I've done that. At this point, typically what I do is I just kind of smush it and get it pulled over. The main thing you're doing is you're clipping that lining bottom now to the right side together with the lining side. You will be sewing through several layers here. You're going to be sewing through your bottoms and your sides. Everything's going to be put all together, and then the gusset will be able to be top stitched and basted all around, so it's one piece, and then we'll be able to add it to our main panels. You can see what I got here. It's kind of messy, but all my layers are together and they'll be fine once we do, once I get through sewing it. Whoops, lost a clip. So I'm just going to sew from one side to the other, making sure I back stitch and using the seam allowance given the pattern. I will make sure that I'm keeping all my pieces lined up. I don't want anything slipping where there's several pieces here. I want to be careful with that for sure. I'm going to flip these all out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these apart and just top stitch on that bottom. So once again, the bottom piece is going to be top stitch. It'll be a little bit tricky because you don't want this other part to get under the needle and be attached. So just make sure you're checking that before you take a stitch so that it's not in the way and it doesn't get attached. Now that I have that all attached, I'm just going to baste down the sides and the bottom, these long edges, just so it's easier for me to add to the main panels. It's not a necessary step. I just find it a step that helps it be a little bit easier for me. I'm just going to baste it 1/8 of an inch away. I'm making sure that I'm keeping everything pulled out and that only the 2 layers are going to be under my needle at any point. Okay, the gusset's completely done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim up my threads, and if I have any overhang, I'm going to trim that up. I'm also going to make my center marks. I always have a little bit of overhang. I definitely have some threads here and there and everywhere, so I just want to get all that cleaned up first. Now that I have everything trimmed, what I'll do is I will just put a clip for the 2 zipper gussets right there where those zippers end. I'll put a clip there. This is how I'm going to mark my centers. So I have that clipped in place. Then I'm just going to get straight here, and I am going to add a clip here. You can make a mark, you can do a small snip with your scissors, or you can just do like me and add a clip, whatever works best for you. But you definitely want to mark these somehow, some way, so that you can make sure your bag is put together and looks nice at the end. Everything's evenly distributed. The seam between the side panels and the bottom gusset should match up as well. Okay, so now I have my center marks made, top and bottom. I am not doing quarter marks on this gusset. I am just leaving it like this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting everything together. I almost always add the front first. It just makes more sense that I will add the front first. The back's going to be a little bit trickier, and I want the front of the bag to look the best, of course. So that's the most important thing to me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start by matching up the center marks first. For me and my gusset, either way looks the same, so it doesn't matter. I don't have to be careful at all about which side I add first. I take my center marks and I just clip them together. I'm going to do a few clips on each side before I go down to the bottom to do the same thing. Okay, so I have that top decently clipped. Let's go down to the bottom and do the same thing to kind of get it secured there. So now that I have the center marks kind of clipped in place, I'm going to go ahead and start going around the curves and clipping there. I'm going to save that last 90-degree angle. I'm going to save it for last. That will be the part that I clip last. And I'll show you what I'm going to do with it. If you remember, I cut out tiny squares on mine. So I have clipped all the way down to where that part is that I cut out. That's going to be my 90-degree angle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shove my main panel down into my gusset. Since I have that box cut out, it'll allow it to overlap so that it'll go directly in there and I can get that perfect 90-degree angle. When I sew, those lines, you can see the box is gone now because they're overlapping. I'm just going to sew over that. I'll show you how I sew it, but that's the way I've been doing it. And I find I'm having a little bit better luck. Typically, when I'll do a gusset with a 90-degree angle, I'll have some kind of overhang there, and this way just kind of gets rid of that overhang before you sew it. You don't have to though. It's not a requirement. It's just something I feel like has been helping me lately. I'm going to show you this one more time. Here is that little box I cut out, and you see it's already kind of closing up already. I am just going to push it down. So I'll push one side down and go ahead and clip there. And the other side just wants to go immediately in there, and you can see it just completely folds on top of it, and the gap disappears and you don't have any overhang. Okay, so this is how it looks. Typically, whenever I'm doing a bag like this with a gusset, I'm just going to sew all the way around with a basting stitch. I don't do that with this one. With this one, what I do is I go from the bottom part first. So I don't go from corner to corner. I leave that seam allowance as a gap. So what I do is a little bit different. It is very hard for me to start sewing and have my needle all the way against that to get that perfect fit here. So I don't. I start in the middle and I get my seam allowance and I backstitch here first. Then I'm going to sew all the way down this edge until I get away from the corner, the edge, the same amount of the seam allowance. So if your seam allowance is 1/2 inch, I would stop 1/2 inch away from that edge. Like I said, this is not a requirement. You do not have to do this. It's just the way I've been doing it myself. Because it is so hard for me to go like start here and get this all underneath, what I do then is I flip this over and I do the same row of stitching to the other corner. Back stitch again, of course. Same seam allowance given in the pattern. Go all the way to this edge minus the seam allowance. So whatever the seam allowance is, you stop that far away from your corner. So that gets my bottom attached. And then what I do is I'm just going to continue sewing it the normal way now. I'll go ahead and make sure, let me make sure my bottom's pushed in. If think I'm going to sew it with the gusset against the bed of the machine. Doesn't really matter, honestly. I think I've done it both ways and not had a problem. So whatever works best for you, whichever way you prefer, do it that way, honestly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing the same way. I'm going to take away the seam allowance and start sewing there. So if my seam allowance was 1/2 inch, I would start sewing 1/2 inch away. Backstitch and then just continue around until you get to this other side and do the same thing. I know it sounds confusing, but it's really not, and this is not something you have to do if you don't like it. When I'm going around this curve, I'm making sure that I keep everything in line. I'm trying to make sure that I don't like have shifting happening. If you're someone that likes to hand baste or use staples or use glue, whatever, you could definitely do it here. Okay, so I'm going to take the time to look at everything I got. I feel like I lost my seam allowance once. So you definitely want to make sure that you don't sew over your handles, of course. I'm going to look and see how my corners look. If you want, you could even push this out. And this is where I lost the seam allowance just a little bit, but that's okay. That little bit won't bother me. Same thing on this side. So be careful right there with those curves where it shifts from the curve to the straight. That has a tendency to kind of walk away from you a little bit under your machine. My corners look good. Everything's great there. So that, I'm content with that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the binding onto this side. I'm not going on to my second side until I get that binding attached. And you can see where mine is kind of floppy. If I had the foam, it wouldn't be that way. So for my next ones, and I will be making more, I am going to use foam in them. The binding will help to give it like a little bit more kind of like some structure, but I wanted more for sure. So like I said, I'm just using water resistant canvas. I have mine cut into strips. I suggest maybe 1.25 inches for this one, and then I'm just going to fold it around. Nothing fancy here. Now on this step, I am not going to worry at all about doing that different type of stitching that I did with the last one. I'm just going to sew all the way around. I've already kind of established my corners with that original stitch, so this is just going to be kind of putting it in place, so it won't be as hard. The corners are already kind of sewn on, and I'm just going to kind of add this as the afterthought. All I do is fold it over, kind of wrap it around. You want to make sure you have an even amount on both sides. I don't have to worry about folding an edge under because this is non-fraying. It won't give me any grief. When I get to the corner, I'm going to kind of go ahead and like miter that corner and kind of push it down so that it folds on top of itself. Kind of hard to show it, but it kind of does it its own, really, honestly, once you start getting it in there. And just the main thing you want to do is make sure that when you're folding this binding, that you're making sure you push it down to where that edge is right here. You don't want to, when you sew the binding, to not have the bag with the crease right against this edge. So you want them completely attached so that it looks like it just fits really well. I'm going to go ahead and clip all around this with the binding. So I'm going to go ahead and take it all the way around. When I come back, we'll sew it on, and then we'll do those same steps for the other side, and then we're done. I have the binding all clipped around. I'm just going to sew around the binding with the seam allowance, given the pattern. I'm not going to do anything unique with this. I'm just actually going to sew all the way around at one time, no stopping and starting on this one. After I get this binding sewn, what I'll do is I'll do those exact same steps to attach the back to the gusset as well, and then I will do all that off camera, and I'll come back just to turn everything around. I have both sides bound, sewn, everything's ready to go. All we have to do is turn it inside out. I probably will do some shaping on the bag, and then I will show you how I do that, and then it'll be ready to use. So even just freshly turned and everything looks great. But what I like to do is I like to shape the bag. I bought these clips off Amazon and I really like them because they're very strong, they don't break, and yet they have this rubber on the end so it doesn't kind of like leave indentions or anything. But I definitely start right here with the seam. As you can see, that seam is thicker than the others, and so I definitely want to take some time to kind of compress it flat, but also so that it can lay the way I want it to. I'm going to go all around these seams, just clipping all the way around. I don't have to leave the clips on long. I just usually leave them on 10 minutes or so. There has been times I've just planned on leaving them overnight just because I wasn't ready to take pictures and just thought, oh, I'll get to it in the morning. But for this one, I am just going to leave it on for a little bit because I want to finish the video and because I want to take pictures of this bag. Definitely on the webbing, you'll want to clip there. That is a tight seam also. And I just kind of stick my fingers inside to push it out. When I get to this bottom, what I'll do is I'll put a clip here, and then I will come to that other side and clip there to kind of help it to be that 90 degrees that I want it to be. You can stick your hand inside and push out the seam so that you're clipping right up against it. This is how the first side looks clipped. I'm going to do that same thing all around the other side, and then I'll let it sit for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and show you how everything looks. I just took the clips off and I am so in love. Look at the shape of this bag. It is adorable. I love a wide gusset. It's really good, so you have lots of room to put things in there. Super, super cute. I'm definitely going to be making so many of these. It comes together so quick. I honestly don't know which one I like best. I love both of these so much. They are so cute for sure. So this pattern is the newest pattern from Backstitch and Baste. Check out all her patterns. I really love her designs. I think they're just really cute and very beneficial patterns. This is the Munch Tote lunch bag. It is available now. I'll have the link in my description. I will also post her Facebook group because it's fun to just see what other people are sewing. The fabric and the webbing are both from the Empurrium from Brittany. She is doing a pre-order this month, and I'm pretty sure it should be open by the time this video posts. Definitely join her Facebook group too because she has all the details of when she's having pre-orders or retail posted in that group. And thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. This one was super fun and I really needed a fun sew. I was so excited to sew this one and I love it. It's just beautiful. Thanks so much for watching and you have a great day.